Hey everyone, welcome back to In Her Wallet, a weekly podcast helping women around the world take control of their finances for good and build better financial futures, one episode at a time. My name is Sofiia. I am the host of this podcast, creator behind all things In Her Wallet, and an accredited investment representative here in Canada. Today, my guest is Stephanie Wolfe. Stephanie is the founder of Wolfe Collective Wealth, a platform where Stephanie teaches women how to confidently invest and manage their money in a way that is aligned with your values. When Stephanie and I were brainstorming on the topic for today's conversation, naturally we started talking about how money is one of the most uncomfortable and stressful topics when it comes to our romantic relationships. Stephanie shared that that's what oftentimes her clients come to her with, issues like that. And I also realized that that's what I often discuss with my friends. Naturally, because Roman and I just got engaged, we also are going through a lot of conversations related to finances because it just naturally feels like it's the right time to do as we're getting into the next stage of our relationship. So in this episode, Stephanie shared the tools to better discuss money in our relationships and in general strategies on how we as women can make smarter decisions when it comes to our money. If you're someone who struggles to bring up money in the relationship or feel like you and your partner are not on the same page with regards to finances, this episode is definitely for you. If you want to connect with Stephanie one-on-one, make sure to check out the link in the episode description for a free 20-minute discovery call with Stephanie where she can assess your situation and help you get the right guidance for it. And one last thing before we head into the chat. If you love In Her Wallet podcast and the content that we produce for you every week, besides leaving us a 5-star review, you can now also support us in the way of buying me a coffee because, there are sometimes all-nighters that I pull to make this happen. This is a great way to support the content creation process, which I do from start to finish all by myself, and to support the podcast and let us bring even more great guests for you. Once again, I am very grateful to you for doing that and for listening to the show. With that said, Stephanie, welcome to In Her Wallet. We are so excited to have you on.
Oh, I am so excited to be here, Sofiia. It's so nice to see you in person.
I know. Exactly. And quite a few people told me about you. So I am so happy that we finally got in touch and we are recording together. So it's just very exciting. I'm super excited for this episode.
We're going to be talking about some fun stuff today. So ready to dig in whenever you're ready.
Exactly. Before we do that though, Steph, let's do a little icebreaker. Usually with our guests, I ask them 3 questions so everyone can get to know you on a more personal level. Sure. So tell me, what's your go-to coffee order?
Okay, so anybody who follows me on Instagram knows that I am a hardcore Starbucks lover, but it's a boring coffee. It's literally 1 milk, 1 cream, grande pike. That's it, every day. And occasionally I will pay it forward and pay for the person behind me. But that's my my regular coffee order is a grande pike. Yeah.
Good for you. Wait, so do you drink coffee out every day?
Every day. Like every day. And I know it's the latte factor. But I truly believe in living your best lifestyle. There's a very strategic way to go about doing that. I don't want anybody to give me a hard time about buying my daily Starbucks because there is a way that I integrate it into my lifestyle.
Into your budget.
That's right.
It's there because you love it. Mm-hmm. Exactly. I always preach this on the podcast. You don't have to, when you're budgeting, it doesn't mean that you have to cancel out and say no to the things that you love. That's what the budget is there for. Exactly. You put the things that you love and you make space for it.
Mm-hmm. It's about prioritization. Perfect. Yep.
Yes. Okay, well, my next question is, what's the movie you can rewatch again and again?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so when I have to be completely honest, I don't watch a lot of TV or movies. And so I'm one of those worst people to go to, like, hey, have you seen blah, blah, blah? No, I haven't seen it. So I actually do not rewatch movies. So that is what I'm going to say. Favorite movies? Okay, this is totally contradictory to my personality, but I love the John Wick series. Like, there's something about John Wick and Keanu Reeves. I could just watch Keanu Reeves all day, every day. So if I had to rewatch a movie, it would be with him.
I think I have a secret crush on him, actually.
Yeah.
I've never talked
Who
about it.
doesn't? Oh, he's just so, there's just something about him. Anyway.
Yeah. Stephanie, and my last question is, if you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would that be? And as a disclaimer, Stephanie has children, so I wonder if you're going to say you're going to go alone or with them, because I've actually had guest speakers who are with families and with children, and they were like, don't ask me that question.
It's such a hard question. Well, if my children are listening, obviously I would take them. However, there is one holiday that's been on my checklist where I would actually go by myself. So even my spouse is going to be like, seriously? It's in St. Lucia, and it's called the Body Holiday. And it's like a 1 week retreat where you get to select all the things that you want to do that fill your cup. Like, it's, if I want to do yoga every day, I can do that. But it's solely focused on regenerating and focusing on you. And honestly, it's on my bucket list, and I hope to get there within the next year or two. So somewhere in St. Lucia, that's hopefully where I will be on my personal wellness retreat. Yes.
Sounds so good. And I have not heard of this retreat before. So thanks for sharing with us. I'll definitely be going to Google it after our recording.
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, well, with that out of the way, Stephanie, can we do a little bit of an intro about you, what you do, what your career has been like, what you do right now, for those people in the audience who might not know you yet?
Sure. Okay. Well, as you introduced me, my name is Stephanie Wolfe. I am an accredited financial counselor of Canada, and I run a business called Wolfe Collective Wealth. And my goal really is to empower and give women the confidence and the knowledge, the foundational knowledge that they need to invest in 90 days or less. And so I have a very specific one-on-one coaching program that I run with them, as well as a foundational course called the Investment Accelerator. And it's 90 days, and it's just incredible to watch the financial transformations for all of the clients that I have been supporting over the last few years. I got into it because of a personal passion that I have around giving women the tools that they need around money. I've worked in the industry for close to two decades now. I've been at the big firms. I worked at BlackRock. I was head of marketing there for some time, and so I saw this time and again. There just wasn't what I thought a safe space for women to really own the money conversation and really lean into it. So that is my goal, my purpose. I love to talk about anything money, anything to support women as it relates to getting them wealthier. That's my goal. I think that the more wealth women have in this world, the better off we're going to be. So that is my modus operandi. That's how I operate, and that's what I do. And actually, people should follow me Instagram. Wolfe Collective Wealth is my handle. Wolfe with an E. I've recently gotten into Threads. I have gone down the rabbit hole on Threads. I know. Oh, so I need to get back onto my Instagram platform because I kind of have spent the last week obsessed with Threads. But anyway.
Yes, me too. And some of my friends are die-hard, is that the word? Die-hard Twitter fans. And like we have like a battle going on as to who is like supporting which camp.
Yes.
And all of us, like I've never been a Zuckerberg fan, but I love Threads. And all of a sudden I love him because I love this app. I know.
It's so easy. Like, it's really easy to just communicate my thoughts. Whereas I felt Instagram is sometimes it takes a little bit of time to curate the image and, have the right message come across. Whereas I can just post, very similar to Twitter. But I felt Twitter was almost, I left it a year or two ago for other reasons, but, it's kind of fun. I like Threads just for the simplicity and the community. So we'll see where it goes.
I wouldn't say though that I post like very fast because I feel like I overthink things. So I'm typing something. I'm like, is this funny enough? Is this good enough? And then I would delete it. And then I'd be like thinking about it and then post again. Anyways, this is a whole different conversation, but I love the intro that you did. I love everything that you do. And I think we totally share the same values and mission. What we're talking about today is conversations about money in relationships. Women of our audience here are 25, I would say, to 35 years old. I think that's kind of your prime time when you get into a relationship or maybe into a more serious relationship. And I feel like a lot of women in my friends, they're afraid oftentimes to start these conversations with their partners. So my first question would be like, how do you bring up these conversations about money?
I know. And it's one of those things too, where it's like, you don't want to be out on a first date and be like, so how much do you earn? And, what's your credit
Exactly.
score? It can be very awkward, and who's going to pick up the tab? And so it's, money conversations are always tough to come up. But there's so many ways to bring it up. And honestly, it has to be discussed sooner rather than later. In my experience anyway, I have worked with clients who it has come up only, couple years into the relationship. I recently worked with a client who they were ready to purchase a house. They said, yes, this is going to be our big first step together. They went through the whole process, and that's when she discovered he had nothing in terms of retirement saved, and found out about some surprise debts that he had been carrying as well. So it can make or break a relationship, I think, with the money. And so I would say sooner rather than earlier is the time to have the conversation. But I know how awkward it can be. So depending on like where you're at in the relationship, it doesn't have to be something that I would say you have to like sit across from the table and do it like interview style. Like, okay, let's figure this out. I mean, sure, maybe for some people that might work, but for some of us, we can have these like feelings of anxiety when it comes to having these money conversations, and how do we actually go about having it. And I would say, anxiety, and we can unpack that in a minute, like why some of us have some of these issues around talking about money. But in a relationship, like I said, sooner is better. And it might even be as simple as just having that conversation, like, hey, how do you like to pay for certain things? How much do you set aside for investing? Just to kind of open up that conversation into the money and start slowly, before you decide to purchase a house with somebody. So
Totally.
one technique that I think was kind of an interesting one is to go out to a coffee shop, or somewhere that is a neutral ground, and both have sticky notes. And the idea here is that you would ask each other money questions, but instead of answering it directly, you would write it down, and then you pass the note to the other person, and then that person can open it and see what the answer is. So it could be, what is your income? How much do you earn? And you slide it across, and then that sort of opens up the conversation to that's not
Almost
as
like a
intense.
game.
Exactly. And you can have a little bit of fun. It's kind of like revealing certain things. And it's just, that's a good technique to kind of ease your way into it. But like I said, it all depends on the relationship and like where you're at and how you feel about money and talks.
Yeah. So I love that game. I love it. And let's circle a little bit back. When you're just starting to date, like, you obviously don't want to be in a position where you're already so invested into a relationship, you're considering buying a house together, and that's when you start the conversation, because that's obviously a little bit too late. But you also don't want to start it too early, especially if you're like not really planning a serious relationship. So there is that golden kind of, I think, middle. I find that probably good opportunity to start that conversation and maybe play this game is when you're deciding to move in together and you're going to be splitting some bills, or when you're deciding, to get engaged and you're going to be talking about prenuptial agreement, or
Yeah.
you're deciding to buy a home. So like, I feel like throughout lifetime, there are these milestone events that can be a good trigger towards a conversation like that. But if we go back, so you're just dating. I feel like a lot of girls that listen to us, they might be in that dating phase. One of the probably cringiest moments when you are, in terms of money and relationship, is probably when you're on a date, or like you're out and having dinner or lunch, and then the bill comes. So who is gonna pay for it? How do you approach this whole aspect of things? What do you think is the best way? When's like, do you discuss that in advance, or do you like, is there like an expectation? How do you go about that?
Oh my gosh. That's such a loaded question, because the traditionalist in me is like, obviously he should be picking up the tab, but I completely believe in, 50-50. However, if you're a couple months into the dating scene, like with this one person in particular, it can get really expensive, right? And so, no matter what your income level is, always going out to eat or having these dates that cost money, it can start to add up, and it might be outside of your discretionary spending budget, as we were talking about at the top of the call, right? Like you're prioritizing certain things within your life, and dating sometimes can be an expensive endeavor. So I would say if you're a couple months into a relationship and things are going really well, definitely start to talk about like, hey, I love being with you. I love spending time with you. And let's think about some things that we can do that maybe don't cost so much money, because I have XYZ to spend this month, and I'm really focused on doing this. So I think having a very open and transparent conversation would probably go a long way, because they might be feeling that same pressure too. You don't know. So I say empower yourself to have that conversation, bring it up, and say, how about we, do a picnic or something. Like, I would love to do something that's less expensive because I'm saving for something else. So sometimes that will open up a door to a whole new conversation. But I encourage women to really to own that and be open and honest.
Yeah. And I like that. And I feel like when you are already starting to move in together, or you sleep over at his place
Mm-hmm.
more often, and it's more than just about paying for the food when you go out occasionally for dinner or lunch, then maybe it's time to consider what kind of financial approach you're taking in this relationship. At least in my circle of friends, I have some who, like, it's 50-50, as what you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned. I have some friends who are doing more of a traditional approach where, the man covers majority of expenses or
Mm-hmm.
all of the expenses. And then the third, I feel like, approach is when both both people are earning, but their income is not the same. So then
Mm.
it's percentage, right? So maybe at some point in time, if it's spilling, if you're going into more than just dating or moving in together, then it's time to have that kind of conversation to set the boundaries.
For sure. And actually, all of those approaches are good ways to take it. And personally speaking, my husband and I, when we were first together and moved in together, we did, and even after we were married, and we had a shared account, it was based off percentage, because we had there was a disparity in our income, not significant, but enough that it wouldn't make sense to go 50-50 in my opinion. So what we did was 80-20. So 80% of our income was going into a shared account, which is probably higher than what most people do. But we did 80% because we were, it paid everything, mortgage, groceries, etc. And 20% was kept. I think every woman needs to have her own bank account. And so that 20% would be my money, and I can use it whenever. And to some degree, we almost use that to this day in our marriage, and it works very well. So each of us has our own pocket of money, but the other options do work as well. I mean, it changes over time, and that's why it's so important to have like a fluid conversation around money. And if two people it's so funny. They always say, oh, there's a spender in a marriage or in a relationship and there's a saver. That's not always the case, but, people are never going to match completely on what their thoughts and feelings are around money. So it's one of those things that you just have to always try to understand the other person's position and really have some open conversations. Now, if somebody is in like a lot of debt, like we were talking about at the beginning, where, she was they're gonna buy a house together, and she's like, whoa, how are we going to actually do this? I'm not sure I want this anymore. You need to be prepared. And actually, I do have a story. I have another client that just came to mind right now who I did work with, and it's not a happy ending, but it was necessary, and it took us a little while to get there. But she had accumulated a lot of debt, and when we unpacked why she had this debt, it was actually a result of her spouse. And so she was constantly swooping in to cover him in certain situations, and he had also taken out some loans with her money, like with her name as well. So They are no longer married, so what I will say, and she was left with a big pile of debt that she has had to work aggressively to pay off. But there was a lot of discussions and learnings, I guess you could say, that came out of that conversation, and things that she knows that she would do differently. And one of them was just knowing sooner that he was really horrible at spending money. I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but it's just that client holds a special
Scary.
spot in my heart because of what she had to go through, and the realization that the relationship wasn't actually going to work and that it wasn't serving her anymore. And so,
Yeah.
very difficult, but oh God, like having those conversations early on is so important.
This is scary. This is like such a big example that you just gave us. And I actually have a friend of mine who has been in a similar situation, but that person went and started getting loans after they broke up. So I wasn't sure if that was kind of like a payback or they were just not like mentally there. But that's the reason why it's so important to have these money conversations early on, because it's an opportunity for both of you to understand if you have any financial red flags and what your approach is. I mean, everyone's different. We've always been brought up differently in terms of money. And I feel like a lot of our relationship to money comes from our parents' relationship to money.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
yeah, you kind of like can't almost judge the person for that, but it's an opportunity to work on it together if you're really in a union and you want to build a future together.
Mhm.
But going back, like we were talking about the percentage split,
Mhm.
I really like that approach as well. I just got engaged, and
Oh,
Roman is a little bit.
congratulations! I did
Oh,
not know
thank you.
that.
Thank you. It was late April, so I'm in the wedding planning phase right now. Yes, but Roman is much further in his career, and obviously his income is more than mine when we started dating.
Mhm.
Now I'm building a startup, so I don't have a stable income at all. So at this moment in time, like he's covering majority of the expenses, and especially when we go out, but I still love to occasionally treat him to some things.
Mhm.
And we did have that sit down conversation where I said, hey, like I want you to know that I do not expect this to be going like that forever. I'm working really hard to get myself to like a certain level of income right now, and once I get there, let's revisit the conversation.
Mhm.
So I feel like that gives peace. Like if you're able to communicate about finances with your partner in that way, it gives peace of mind to them, to
Oh,
understand where you
absolutely.
stand,
Yeah.
and to you as well, because you know that in your relationship it's almost like an additional almost level of trust, right? It adds that level of trust in the relationship with your partner.
Mhm.
So just wanted to throw that in.
It's so important, and what I'll say is that when I entered into my marriage, I'm going to confess something here that I've never confessed before. I was the spender, and my husband was the saver, and I mean, like I was bad. That is part of the reason I am very interested in money and how I even got into the entire industry. Long-winded story. I won't bore you with that, but it was. When I was taking my Canadian securities course, my husband was just laughing hysterically. He's like, I cannot believe you, of all people, are taking the CSC. Like, how is this happening? Because, but that's what I did, and so maybe that's an extreme case to solve some of the money issues that I had carried from my childhood. Money was never talked about when I was a kid. It was not for me. I didn't believe that I was worthy of a certain amount of money. So that was why I was constantly spending. But it took a lot of years and a lot of work in the space to really understand and heal some of those issues. And that allows me to then also understand. I think many times where other women are coming from, because I find women, it's societal, it's cultural, it's generational. There's things that are passed down to us. certain assumptions as well around women and money, things that we need to work through. And I think, as time goes on, I'm seeing so much progress and change happen, but it starts with you and the work that you have to do. And so I am no longer the spender. I am an intentional spender. So I do have a budget for the things that bring me joy, that I want to spend on. But that took years. It took years. So
That's a fantastic transformation, Steph. Thank you so much for highlighting that for us. Like, I feel like so many people might be in a position where like they weren't taught how to be good with money, and they're not in a place right now where they feel like they're doing well with it. You're the testament to the fact that you can actually go from there to becoming a professional who advises people of, how to be good with money through hard work on yourself first and
mhm.
foremost. So I think this example is a great entryway into the next thing I want to talk about is I feel like if you don't feel secure about your own financial situation, if someone approaches you or like your partner or boyfriend approaches you to talk about money, you'll probably get emotional and you wouldn't want to have that type of conversation. So what if you're the partner who approaches or is being approached about money talk, but things get emotional? You might even potentially get into a fight. How do you handle that?
Yeah, and that can be tough because money is emotional, right? And it can have us feeling certain ways, right? Like I just 100% hands down, if somebody doesn't have a good relationship with money, yes, and they're having a conversation, yes, somehow they're going to feel either attacked, or they're not going to feel that they're, worthy, or that this is not a conversation for them, and they might shut down completely. So it's kind of tough because it varies for every individual about the type of conversation that's happening. So if you're the person who has money anxiety, I think you really have to take a step back, and maybe I would even say go so far as, depending on how much anxiety you have, assessing that and determining whether or not you need additional support or help to help you work through some of those things. Because for some people, they completely shut down and they're not able to actually move forward. And that can be detrimental long term, obviously, to your mental health as well. Like, it's all interconnected. When we talk about financial wellness, it's that whole wheel, right? Of, your so money, your health, your wealth, everything is just interconnected. And so I would say, if for some people who are suffering from extreme anxiety, assess the situation, determine whether or not you need to get additional support or help. If you're somebody who's like, okay, I just have some issues that, I was told blah, blah, blah when I was a child. And so, rich people are greedy. And so I have this hard time, understanding how I'm supposed to be building wealth because I don't want to be that greedy person. Right. So these are subconscious beliefs that sometimes are ingrained with us early on in life, and really coming to terms with it is the first step. If you're not seeking therapy, then journaling is a great way for some people. Tapping is another modality that I highly recommend for
Tapping?
people. Tapping. Yeah.
What is that?
So tapping into your nervous system and reaffirming some of the over limiting beliefs that you might have around money. So therapy, journaling, tapping, even sometimes meditation, just coming to peace with understanding what you would have told that younger person that you can change.
Yeah.
Accept what it was that happened or what you were told, and say, okay, well, that doesn't serve me anymore, and release it. And, work to be positive in terms of how you're going to overcome those money issues. But when it comes to working with somebody, if you've got two people in a relationship who are both perhaps not very good at money, somebody has to take control. And you know what? It might as well be you. So got to work on yourself first, and just really
Exactly.
understand, what you're trying to achieve. Focus on the end goal. Sometimes that helps as well.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all about small steps.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you don't have to be like, if you're in debt or maybe you're a big spender, your next step is not creating an investment portfolio and earning a 10% return. No, your next step should be something small. You ease yourself into that game, and small steps day in and day out will lead to big results in the long term. I'm a big believer of that.
Can I just on that for one thing, because I find sometimes people can be extreme with with budgets and things like that. If they're like, oh my gosh, I need to get myself like totally on track. This is what I'm going to do. And you start at the beginning of the month with this goal. I'm only going to spend X amount if you're a spender, for example. And I'm saying this from personal experience. This is truly, it doesn't work. Okay. It's like putting yourself, when you're trying to lose weight and you go on a salad diet and you're like 3 days in and you're like gorging on chocolate bars because it's not sustainable. So it's the same thing with money. And I went through this cycle for probably 2 to 3 years before I was like, this isn't working for me, which is then how I learned other techniques, which is I follow the 50-30-20 budget.
Big fan.
Yeah. And so that's where it gave me the flexibility to know that 30% is my discretionary money. That's what I can spend on. And knowing what that set amount was gave me flexibility. So it's a much easier technique, I find, for budgeting, and it's not like the salad diet. And I didn't feel restricted. And so I had been questioned a couple of months ago about savings apps, and they're like, well, what do you think is best, or like budget apps? I hate them. Like I know it works for some people, it really does. Some people love and thrive off, but it didn't work for me because I felt restricted. I felt restricted in my spending.
And I also
Or like
don't
I was
like
bad.
those.
Like I was
And
bad.
I also, yeah. I am a big fan of like traditional Excel spreadsheets. I don't really love the apps because more often than not, they'll ask you to connect your bank account or
Mhm.
something else. And like, just doesn't give me security. I'm so particular. Like, I do not want to
Mhm.
give anyone my bank account details
Yeah.
if it's outside my investment broker, for example.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there is money so personal, and there is no right or wrong.
Yep.
Whatever works best for you, do that.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, some people do thrive with those budget apps, but it all depends on what it is that what goals you've set up for yourself and what you're trying to achieve. And so, this goal that I had, this unrealistic goal about only spending a certain amount, really didn't serve me well, and it just led me to feel crappier about myself and my money. So it's about finding that healthy balance, but it took a lot of internal work.
Yes, but you got there.
I got there. Now I can
Yes.
teach others.
Exactly. Steph, now that we kind of touched base on goals and we started to talk about that, so if you are finally having those conversations with your partner about money, what should you be talking about? Should there be certain goals that you're setting for yourself, for your future? What are some of the things to focus on in these conversations?
So, very important conversations to have. And I love that you've asked this question because let's assume that you've just got married or like you're heading into marriage. So you want to make sure that you're aligned on, like, you have similar goals, right? Like you don't want this person saying, oh, they're going to do fire and they're going to retire and, when they're 30, and you're sitting there going, well, wait a second. I don't really want to put it, live like underneath the fire lifestyle. If for anybody who doesn't know what fire is, it's financial independence, retire early. It's a fantastic strategy, but it really takes a lot of commitment up front, right? So you want to make sure that you at least have some sort of alignment on what your goals are and that you're working towards the same things. So the things that I would prioritize are, okay, let's see, how much do we really want to put towards our mortgage, right? Let's be realistic. Anybody who's bought a house will know the real estate agents will always be like, oh, you have up to this threshold, in terms of like what you can buy for a house. Never do what they tell you on that, because you want to be practical, right? Like, let's keep it within the right threshold, because there's all those expenses that come once you purchase a house. So make sure that you're on the same page as it comes to how much you want to be spending on a house. You can make sure that you're prioritizing your future self, so your investments. That's why I say it's very important, if you are going to be looking at going in jointly with expenses, that you do have your own income set aside before you do that 80%, 80-20 split, that percentage split.
So does it mean you're saying it's better to have your own investments?
Yes, I actually do believe that I believe that women should have their own investments. Yes, independent of their spouse or partner.
So there can be a joint bank account, but investments potentially kept separately, or your savings, of course, that emergency fund. Every woman should have her own.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only exception, obviously, is when you start to have children together. Then obviously you're going to be looking at joint, camp, RESP, like there's going to be other expenses that come into that. And so it's just when you're first starting out, you want to make sure that you're aligned, you have similar expectations and goals, you understand how much each person is comfortable contributing to certain things. And if you're finding that you have blocks when that happens, then it requires the sit down. Let's figure this out together and find a compromise. But for the most part, I would say yes, every woman absolutely needs to have her own bank account. She should have her own investment accounts. And you should be prioritizing, I think the recent stats are saying 13 to 15% of your net pay should be going towards investments. So let's say you've got 5% from your workplace employee program, aim to have 10% if you can going into that TFSA or an additional RRSP. So those are just some of the things to think about, but those are the targets that you want to be working towards. But it varies for everybody.
Stephanie, for those women in our audience that are listening who might be the followers of, the man is the breadwinner in the family and they are raising children right now at this moment in their time, and they are maybe a joint beneficiary or a joint account, investment account, or they're the beneficiary of the account. I think it's important to highlight that even though the men might be leading the finances, they still need to participate in the conversation about what the money is being invested into. What are we doing? Like, what's the strategy? What's the approach? Can we highlight that quickly?
Oh my gosh, I am so glad you brought that up. And it wasn't even on my mind until you said it. And I said, absolutely, right? Because I often work with clients who are employed, right? Or they're entrepreneurs, et cetera. So, but yes, there is a large cohort of women out there who have their spouse who is taking care of the finances right now. And the number one piece of advice that I would give is be sure to be in those conversations when they're talking to the financial advisor. And exactly as you said, understand what it's invested in. Spousal RRSP, understand how it works, what, you're entitled to, what it's being invested in. Understanding where the funds are being invested, because you're going to benefit from that in the future as well, right?
Exactly.
So not just even outside of the RSP, there could be some non-registered funds, et cetera. Just having a full picture. So participate in the I know that you're really busy and perhaps this is like, the money conversation might be quote unquote boring or yes.
Yeah.
But honestly, if you're working with a good financial advisor, they should be the ones really supporting you through this conversation and
yes.
And sharing and share your goals too. Like saying, I plan to go back to work in 5 years, or I don't plan to go back to work and I want to make sure that I have XYZ for the children. Are we going to reach this goal? And so I think it's important to participate in those conversations for what's important to you, right? Because that needs to be addressed as well. If you don't feel like your goals or your values are being met in that conversation, then it might be time to consider either working with a different financial advisor or having your spouse really engage in what those goals and values are important to you. So it's brought up in those conversations.
Yeah. I always, as you probably might know, my fiance Roman, he's a portfolio manager and investment advisor, and he works primarily with a male audience. He works with NHL players and some individuals as well. But I always tell him, make sure to include the wife in that meeting and make her feel safe to ask you questions.
Yes.
Even if that means that it's going to take extra 10, 20, 30 minutes of your time, encourage her to ask questions because she might have them, but she might feel like, this is a professional. I'm intimidated. I don't want him to feel that I might be asking something silly. Like, if you are in a couple that's working with a financial advisor, that's one of the additional ways to also evaluate that relationship, because it's built on trust, and you want to be working with a person who, gives you that safe space.
Exactly. You just brought up something interesting when you talk about the woman might feel, and this is something that I've come across many times over the years, is that the women have a lack of confidence. And so that's something that I hope that even this conversation will change, right? If there's like any questions that people have, I'm sure they can reach out to you, right? And just ask them and, start with like, there's not a whole lot of like finance books that I would recommend. I find there's some, like, I love listening to some great podcasts, knowing what's out there, just getting familiar with some financial terms as well, just to get comfortable talking about money.
Let's go back. I want to ask you one last question because I know we're already at time. Um, Everything might be going smoothly and you're having these conversations, but what
Yeah.
if you notice some red flags? If you start to notice that potentially your partner is not as good with money as you expected, or they're a big spender, or they like to go to the casino, like what are the most, from your experience, what are the most common red flags and how should we approach them?
Financial infidelity. That is, like, honestly one of the it's something that I don't think enough people are aware about, and they might not even realize when they're in a relationship that this is happening to them. So the red flags can be hard to identify. Let's just say that it can be hard if you're not transparent with money and this person seems to have money or go out and be spending and you're not sure where that money is coming from. That would probably be the very first red flag that would be an indicator. Asking you to sign something, but you don't know what it's for. So that is another huge red flag. Never sign anything unless you know what it's for. I'm trying to think
Remember
of it.
that movie? Have you watched the movie The Other Woman?
No, I have. See, I told you I'm the worst person with movies.
Okay, basically, it's Cameron Diaz and the other actress I love, but it's basically about a man who is in a relationship with his wife. They're married in marriage. And like, I won't go into the whole script. I absolutely recommend you this movie. It's such a good kind of girl night movie
Yes.
with a glass of wine. But he makes her sign all these documents all the time. And she's
Ooh.
kind of like a housewife, a total trust to him. He gives her, like, he tells her it's like for this or she just does it. At the end of the movie, it turns out that he has all these offshore accounts where he's sending all the money, and that's kind of what she's signing it for. And she doesn't even know about that, and she's not like the beneficiary or something. Anyways, I love that movie, and that's just a great example of what you highlighted.
Yes, yes, it's the signing things. And so, basically, if they seem to be spending on things you're not sure where that income is coming from, signing things that you're not sure what you're signing for because they'll be using your credit, and just being aware of their activities, right? Like, just how are they acting around money? If you try to broach the conversation with them, do they divert it? Do they try to bring up a different topic? Those would be common red flags. Oftentimes, and sometimes it's not even malicious. Like, I'll say, like, there's two types, right? Financial infidelity is like a big deal, right? That's when you're involved with somebody, they're taking advantage of your either income or credit score in some way, shape, or form. But then there's other things where it's completely innocent and, this person just really isn't good with money and it's kind of an issue. And so those red flags are a little easier to identify because they will crop up and, it will come up in the relationship. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations before you do go out to buy a house together. Credit scores are also something that I would, it gives you a really good indication. I mean, you can't go out on a first date and ask somebody what their credit score is, but it is something that, will give you a good indicator of how good this person is with their money. So, I would say for anybody, regardless if you're in a relationship or not, make sure you've got a good credit score. Because at the end of the day, like, if you want to do anything to build wealth, you do need to make sure that the higher your credit score is, the more likely you are to get that good interest rate, the better it is going to be for you in the future when you're looking to get those loans, et cetera. So, credit score would probably be a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. And I feel like if you're the higher income earner in the family, you might maybe not feel comfortable or safe sharing about everything that you have. So maybe that's when, especially if you're common law, I think that's when the prenuptial agreement can come into place. And that's when you can kind of set particular boundaries or terms.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's just something I wanted to add there.
Well, and it's interesting too because when in Ontario, and I know that you're located in BC, and I don't know if the region, like if the laws are the same, because it's provincial. I don't think it's federal, but common law in Ontario essentially means that 1 year everything is 50-50, same as the marriage. So no matter what happens, it's a 50-50 split. So, you know, have some caution as you go into these relationships, knowing that if you don't have anything signed, it's going to be 50-50 at the end of the day. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is it the same in BC? I'm not sure.
It's 2 years.
2 years. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which is like we're in process actually of signing a few agreements with Roman right now, and he's working with his lawyer and I'm working with my lawyer because we know we're getting close to that 2 year period.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of women like don't want to sign these things because they know that if they don't, it's 50-50, but potentially if they are, then maybe they get less. It's not that way. Like that's kind of the myth that a lot of women have about prenuptial agreements, and that, the man wants to protect himself. But in reality, it's the way for you to protect yourself too, because you're working with a separate professional who's helping you draft your conditions that you want to include in it.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I'm glad that we actually brought that up. It's a good, and thank you for sharing that too, that you're being so open, because a lot of women don't actually talk about that. And this is why I'm so happy we're having this conversation, because when you put these on the table, it allows other women to go, okay, I can, if she's doing that, that means I can do it too. Right. Like it's, or at least turn to you and say, hey, Sofiia, remember when you mentioned on your podcast doing this? I'm going through it as well. Can you help me out? And that's what I love so much about working with women, is that there is this, and that's part of the reason that my business name is called Collective Wealth, because as a collective, I think women love to help other women. We just naturally do it. And I see, like I said, it's so amazing and incredible to see women talking about money the way that we are today and owning it. Like we're just owning it. Let's do it. Like we've got this.
Exactly. Exactly. Well,
Yes.
on this positive note, Stephanie, let me ask you, what do you think is financial freedom?
Financial freedom is having the ability to wake up in the morning and to not feel any stress or weight from your financial conditions. So it's not about it's about living that life that makes you happy. So for everybody that's different. And for me, it's the ability to provide an education for my children. That was like number one priority for me. So happy that I can do this, and have the flexibility as well to take the holidays when I want, to do the vacations when I want. That for me is my personal financial freedom. But it's a lifestyle goal for everybody, and it's different for everyone what that means to them.
I recently did an episode where I said that money is the number 2 stressor in women's lives.
Wait, what's
And
number one?
to be honest, I didn't go and I didn't check that. But money is number 2. Yeah, I'm like, what is number 1? I should check that. But
Their spouse. No, just kidding. You're getting married. I didn't say that.
oh my god. Oh my
But
god,
yes,
it's so funny.
money can be a stress. Sorry to interrupt.
But I think going back to having money conversations with your partner, I think that can add an additional level of security if you have these conversations with your partner, to your own financial well-being and freedom. And my next question to you that I ask every guest as a follow-up is, what do you think is every woman should do to achieve financial freedom?
Have their own bank account and invest right away. Invest as soon as you can. And if you happen to have, okay, so it depends on your age. If you're just started working, open up your tax-free savings account. If you know somebody younger in your life who's turned 18, open up a tax-free savings account. But make sure that it's invested. And I talk about this all the time. The sooner you start investing, the better off. So that is like, I will preach this until I'm blue in the face. Investing, get your money working for you. Yes.
Which I just saw this morning. Everyone's talking about the fact, like, it's recession and inflation and things are bad. I just went and saw this morning that up-to-date S&P 500's return so far this year is 17.5%.
That's right. You got to invest because, it's so funny. The people who, during the 2020, right, when we all were about to go into lockdown in March 2020, remember when the stock market dropped? It was like 30% in one day. People were freaking out. And my advice to all my clients at the time was like, don't worry, just stay invested. Well, those who actually exited the market at that, like the next day, because they were freaking out, were never able to get back in at those prices again. So they lost out. And so there's risk with any investment that you make, right? But the more that you understand, like knowledge is power. And the more you understand about how the markets work and what an asset allocation strategy could look like for you, the more you can separate those emotions from those market swings. And investing is so important.
Stephanie, how can our audience get in touch with you?
Well, like I said, Instagram is usually my go-to. You can DM me anytime there. So Wolfe Collective Wealth. But I also have my website is wolfcollectivewealth.com. Again, it's Wolfe with an E. So you got to remember that. And all my information is on there on the website. And recently Threads, but I'm still like, as much as I'm obsessed with it, like I still have to figure it out.
Yes, I think we all do. I think Threads needs to figure out a lot of things as well.
Yeah, they do. There's a few glitches.
Yes. But Stephanie, thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate your time and you sharing all the knowledge that you have and your personal experiences with clients.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sofiia. This was so much fun.
Thank you all for tuning into this episode. If you liked it, please follow the show, leave us a 5-star review, or feel free to go ahead and buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support the podcast and the content creation process happening behind the scenes. As always, I want you to give yourself credit for showing up for yourself and your future, because every time you do that, you increase what's financially possible for you. Don't forget that in the episode description, there is a link for a free 20-minute discovery call with Stephanie. Well, I think with that out of the way, that's it. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I will see you next week.